The Kohun teaches us that senseless savagery is the province of animals, not men. Savagery is useful only if it's controlled and put in service to an end. The end is everything. The lessons that Varadun learned from his father defined his life as a Sith Lord. Born within the Reformed Empire under Sith Emperor Vitiate during the decades preceding the Great Galactic War, Varadun was identified as a Force-sensitive and taken to the Sith Academy on Dromund Kaas. Taking the name of Malgus, he apprenticed under the Sith Inquisitor Vindican and was renowned for his patriotism, commitment, and will. When the Great Galactic War began in 3681 BBY, Malgus was already a veteran of multiple expeditions into the unknown regions and was an eager volunteer. He and Vindican spearheaded the reconquest of Korriban, and became the first Sith to cross blades with Jedi in several centuries. Vindican's fall in this battle marked Darth Malgus' ascendance, and Jedi Battlemaster Kaosen Durach became the first of his many Jedi kills. Malgus was one of the most successful Sith generals, leading a lengthy and brutal campaign where he dominated the open battlefield as a dark-side warrior. However, his many victories were counterbalanced by ordeals that severely tested his mettle, a major defeat at the hands of Satil Shan on Alderaan necessitating an extensive cybernetic and surgical reconstruction of his body. His lust for vengeance shaped his philosophy. The essential quality of the Force is conflict. Through conflict, the strong kill the weak and bring the living closer to perfection. The Sith Empire has served the Force by inciting conflict. The sacking of the Jedi Temple in 3663 BBY was Darth Malgus' finest hour, but the subsequent Treaty of Coruscant left him enraged. Final victory against the Jedi was within reach when the Sith proposed the treaty, but more than anything, he viewed it as a betrayal of the dark side itself, trading strength for stagnation. Murdering his lover Alina to purge himself of compassion, Malgus returned to leading expeditions into the unknown regions, making his plans far from the prying eyes of his peers. His moment of opportunity came when the conflict resumed in 3640, as the Sith Dark Council suffered multiple losses, and Emperor Vitiate disappeared after a run-in with the Jedi hero of Tython. Malgus gathered his forces and commandeered the Emperor's abandoned space fortress, and declared the foundation of a new Sith Empire under his banner. His followers named him Emperor, while his enemies branded him Malgus the Betrayer. From the womb of the Krayt, be blessed with rebirth. You are her killer and her child, a greater dragon than she. Pull from her belly your prize and her apology. Sherrod Hett's final words to his son were for him to never wield his lightsaber in anger or in vengeance. It is therefore truly appropriate that Asherod Hett's fall to the dark side was marked by him doing just that. The eventual Darth Krayt's initial instruction in the ways of the Sith came from the holocron of Zozan, one of the founding Sith Lords. Initially seeking vengeance against the Galactic Empire, this goal came to naught when the Empire fell before Hett could act. The fallen Jedi attempted to lose himself in the unknown regions, only to be captured by the far outsiders, the Yuuzhan Vong. As a test subject for the Vong Shapers, he was visited by Vergere, a renegade Jedi Master and apparent Sith apprentice, one of several cultivated by Darth Sidious to replace Maul, and who had fled the galaxy after a failed attempt to assassinate him. It was under her informal tutelage that Hett truly embraced Sith ideology and composed his own philosophy. Power without purpose is meaningless. Order must be imposed because it will never be chosen. The Order itself above all. Vergere did not agree with Het's ideology, her creed being to do as you will, so she abandoned him to a fate of his own choosing. Time passed, and a moment of opportunity came. Fire and red ruin marked the path of Het's escape, and the Vong implants enabled him to interact with their technology and hijack a ship. Returning to Korriban, the site of his apprenticeship under the shade of Zozan, Darth Krayt created his new Sith Order. Spending time in stasis to lengthen his lifespan, Krayt's mind wandered the netherworld of the Force, while his mindlessly loyal followers acted as an instrument of his will, setting the stage for his eventual rise to power. The wait was long, but everything proceeded as Lord Krayt had foreseen, and 130 years after the Battle of Yavin, the Dragon of the Sith seized the Imperial throne. I will be analyzing Darth Malgus at the height of his power, within the time frame of the Old Republic MMO, specifically the False Emperor Flashpoint. In addition to his appearance within the game itself, I will also be referencing his appearances in the Deceived, Hope, and Return cinematic trailers, the tie-in novel Deceived, and the short story The Third Lesson, with background information from the Old Republic Encyclopedia and the Book of Sith. I will be analyzing Darth Krayt within the time frame of the Vector arc, immediately before his betrayal and death at the hands of Darth Wyyrlok. The strengths and limitations of the Vongtech implants Krayt possessed prior to his resurrection are simply more interesting to discuss, and his demonstrated power post-resurrection placed him on the level with Emperor Palpatine, and therefore out of Malkus's league. In addition to his appearance in the Legacy series proper, I will also be referencing the Legacy Handbook, the Legacy Era Campaign Guide, the Essential Guide to the Force, the Essential Guide to War, and the Essential Atlas. I will not be discussing Krayt's appearance in Fate of the Jedi Apocalypse, as his interactions take place exclusively in the netherworld of the Force as an astral projection, where he demonstrates multiple abilities that he lacks in the series, particularly Force Drain. It's the same reason why I refuse to discuss Grandmaster Yoda's battle with Darth Sidious in the TCW episode Sacrifice. It is, for all intents and purposes, a dream sequence, and therefore cannot be taken as a definitive or accurate demonstration of either combatant's capabilities. With all of that out of the way, let us begin. The treachery of Malgus the Betrayer was motivated by his adherence to classical Sith ideology, where the Dragon of the Sith championed the supremacy of the Order at the total expense of its tradition. Darth Malgus believed in evolution through competition, strength fostered through fair play. As brutal as he was a champion for the rights of others, even if he was only defending their right to be assholes. Darth Krayt believed in order above all else, power magnified by its focus. The purpose of the individual was to serve the collective, and to lay down their lives if need be. If these two infamous Sith warlords were to meet in battle, who would win? A 60-year-old human male, Darth Malgus was a war veteran with a history of severe injury. The most notable of these occurred on Alderaan, when Satil Shan used a powerful telekinetic wave to bury Malgus alive beneath hundreds of tons of rock. Malgus managed to survive by cocooning himself in the Force, though the combined injuries he suffered necessitated a cybernetic reconstruction. Despite this, he fought through the pain and slaughtered 2 more Jedi that day. The Old Republic Encyclopedia detailed that it required the dedicated efforts of the Sith Empire's greatest cyberneticists to stitch Malgus's broken body back together, though beyond the respirator mask used to treat his damaged lungs, the extent of his reconstruction is unknown. I believe that a good benchmark for Malgus's cybernetics are those of Darth Vader, who was fitted with several replacement organs and life support implants to supplement his own respirator, and numerous replacement bones and ligaments to support the weight of his armor and prosthetics. Though Malgus lacked the obvious bionic prosthetics possessed by Vader and was still capable of Force lightning, I believe that his existing limbs were reinforced by powered bracers, similar to the knee brace used by Jedi Master Thulm towards the end of the Clone Wars. Though an extremely fit and robust young man, the elder Malgus clearly owed his continued strength and vitality to his life support and implants, especially given his extreme case of dark side degeneration, displaying the premature aging and deformation exclusive to powerful dark side masters, his eyes glowing yellow. Notable displays of his youthful athleticism include overbearing Satele Shan with hand-to-hand techniques and pounding Kaosen Darach into submission with twin blades. After his reconstruction, he could casually ragdoll even Jedi opponents with physical combat, notably hurling Ven Zalo approximately 50 feet through the air with a full-bodied kick. Though Malgus was using Force enhancement, I consider such displays of physical might to be a strong indication of innate superhuman strength, especially in light of his cybernetic overhaul. Even before this overhaul, Malgus had little difficulty maneuvering in heavy armor, using nimble footwork to keep the evasive Satele Shan in his crosshairs and covering ground with powerful flying leaps. As already mentioned, Malgus was a veteran combatant who had repeatedly endured severe injuries and continued to fight, a capability that was enabled by his suit of Sith dark armor and clearly enhanced by his cybernetics. The armor featured plated durasteel pauldrons, a chest piece, backplates, and a codpiece, with gauntlets and greaves mounted on a ribbed bodysuit, likely composed of armor weave, with reinforced padding across his upper arms, midsection, and thighs. It was proven effective against explosives, and was likely lightsaber resistant, as durasteel plating with reinforcing armor weave is a proven countermeasure against the energy blades. Darth Malgus was an aging heavyweight sustained far past his prime by his cybernetics, and all the more dangerous for it. Forged in the fires of war, he was an experienced and utilitarian combatant who fully leveraged his superior strength and endurance to overbear his enemies. He alternated between savage aggression and stalwart defense, fighting with a ruthless determination to win or die trying. The defining rule among the Tusken Raiders of Tatooine was, whoever has two hands can hold a Gatterfee, and it was typical for Tusken amputees to commit ritual suicide. Appropriately, the end of Asherad Hett's life as a Tusken Raider was the loss of his arm at the hands of Obi-Wan Kenobi. During his years as a fallen Jedi bounty hunter, he used a cybernetic prosthesis, but when captured by the Yuuzhan Vong, they replaced it with an artificially grown organic limb. This would be the first of many alterations. Darth Krayt was a human male, just over 180 years old, his lifespan unnaturally extended by the combination of Vong biotech and long periods of suspended animation. To put it plainly, Darth Krayt was a biotech monstrosity. His body was riddled with Vong biots and coral seeds, and his right arm and left eye were vat-grown replacements. These implants were originally installed by the Vong Shapers to improve his body's ability to endure their experiments, bolstering his capabilities and contributing to his longevity. However, over the decades, the coral seeds continued to grow, turning his body into a horror show of grotesque mutations and growths. Krayt initially kept them in check with healing trances and periods of suspended animation, but these treatments became less effective over time. Despite his poor condition, he boasted a muscular physique and had many compelling displays of athletic ability to his name. Given his ability to casually lift Cade Skywalker with one hand, I feel comfortable saying that Krayt's baseline strength was superhuman, as his condition inclined him to minimize physical strain, using Force enhancement only sparingly. Accordingly, though his intense fighting style fully capitalized on his superhuman capabilities, he emphasized technique over brute strength. Though he favored grounded footwork and postures, rarely employing acrobatics, Krayt demonstrated a dynamic flexibility in his movements, handling his weapons dexterously. Furthermore, the implants continued to enhance his resiliency, an advantage that was reinforced by the Vonduin Scare Kyric that he wore. Another Vong creation, it was a living suit of organic armor with an outer layer of crystalline crab shells, capable of withstanding even lightsabers, though it could be cracked if struck with sufficient force. On Had Abaddon, Krayt was only subdued after being impaled through the shoulder and chest with a lightsaber, hit with a sustained blast of Force lightning powerful enough to disfigure those caught in its wake, and subsequently thrown off a cliff. And he still survived, albeit by using the Force to break his fall. Where the detrimental effects of the coral seeds hit him was in stamina, as periods of physical exertion presumably sped up their growth, and left him badly weakened. Cade Skywalker observed the action of the biots through the Force during his duel with Krayt, describing them as gnawing at his guts. While Force enhancement allowed Krayt to power through in the moment, he was always hit hard after a fight, and if Cade's description is anything to go by, there is a point where Krayt simply wouldn't be able to push himself any further. His brief skirmish with the Imperial Knights on Coruscant left him noticeably weakened, and his extended bout with Cade Skywalker in the Sith Temple forced him to spend time in stasis to recuperate, and was one of the motivating factors behind the Mon Calamari genocide, using the fear and terror of the populace to fuel his dark side abilities and speed up his recovery. Krayt's approach to combat was based around leveraging his superior capabilities to overwhelm his opponents, a more developed version of the style he employed as a Tusken Raider and Jedi Knight, and likely honed during his initial years as a Sith Lord, before his implants began consuming him. Though he fought more delicately, avoiding the intensive hand-to-hand integration that characterized his style as a Jedi, Darth Krayt still held nothing back, avoiding extended engagements by pursuing a quick victory. Although Darth Krayt was approximately 3 times older than Malgus, this age gap was overshadowed by their extensive modifications and enhancements. When comparing Malgus the cybernetic monstrosity to Krayt the biotech monstrosity, it is interesting to note their commonalities but also their differences. Malgus's enhancements were a life-saving measure to keep his broken body together, while Krayt's enhancements were a preemptive measure to make sure he didn't break. Though Krayt's performance level is clearly enhanced to the same level as Malgus's, he isn't as free to rely on it due to his condition. Though his emphasis on controlled technique mitigates physical strain, this measure is predicated on his strength advantage, which doesn't apply here, because Malgus is very likely stronger than Krayt, even if only by a slim margin. Krayt may be able to match Malgus in the moment, but he has no sustainability, whereas Malgus's cybernetics provide limitless stamina. In essence, Krayt is faced by the same scenario that Count Dooku faced against Anakin Skywalker, an opponent who matched him in all the areas that counted and hit him right where it hurt in return. To be fair, Malgus still has an uphill battle ahead of him, as Krayt is just as capable of shrugging off catastrophic injury and hits as he is. Vonduin's Scare Kyric is arguably a more effective lightsaber countermeasure than Malgus's more traditional dark armor, and the severity of the coral seed infestation within Krayt's body meant that most of his body tissue was effectively replaced with a mesh of resilient bioengineered organic material, allowing him to soak up ridiculous amounts of punishment. However, just as with overall physical performance, Krayt merely matches Malgus's resiliency, he does not surpass it. While it is possible that Krayt may turn this dynamic around through skill at arms, he cannot consistently overwhelm Malgus on the back of raw physicality before he burns out and keels over. The Dragon of the Sith sought dominion over life itself, yet ironically was being slowly devoured by his own body. Malgus the Betrayer gets the physical edge. Trained at the Dromund Kaas Academy, Darth Malgus was the premier Sith warrior, renowned within Sith space even before the war. Given how well Lord Bendikan contended with Battlemaster Durach, Malgus clearly benefited from his training, demonstrated when he overpowered Durach. During the war, he racked up hundreds of Jedi kills, as well as besting the eventual Jedi Grandmaster Satele Shan on 2 separate occasions. Battle-hardened and experienced, Darth Malgus was a celebrated duelist, slaying Master Venzalo during the sacking of Coruscant and making quick work of his rival Adras after the war. During his post-war sojourn back to the unknown regions, he clearly remained a frontline combatant. Malgus wielded a standard lightsaber, which followed the heavy-duty design typical of Sith warriors, notably boasting a set of bladed emitter guards. The red plasma blade indicated a synthetic focusing crystal at its heart, following Sith tradition. Blades produced by such gems were known to possess greater cutting power compared to the Ilum crystals favored by the Jedi, but at the cost of reduced handling. A heavy strength-based duelist, Malgus's style balanced hacking cleaves and full-bodied thrusts with stalwart blocks, typically employed for wild attack flurries, though executed with precision and control when necessary. In his footwork and maneuvers, he favored grounded postures, but would employ spins and acrobatics if necessary. By keeping his techniques so simple and loose, Malgus could adapt to accommodate virtually any style, whether fighting with a reversed grip or with dual blades, offensively or defensively. These skills were further reinforced by his smooth integration of physical combat techniques and direct force abilities. Darth Malgus's lightsaber training specialization has not been established, but we can make an educated guess. The Old Republic Encyclopedia established the standard Sith warrior lightsaber forms as being shii-cho, Surisu, Shien, and Juyo, and elements correlating with all 4 can be observed in Malgus's technique. His offensive component followed the sweeping crosscuts of the Determination form, and his defensive component followed the tight blocking sequences of the Resilience form. His use of counters followed the fluid ripostes of the Perseverance form, while his force channeling and occasional use of acrobatics followed the focused energy and emotion of the Ferocity form. But at the end of the day, Darth Malgus was a brutal pragmatist who cared more about killing the enemy than he did about the perfection of his technique. Though his overall style closely approximated Jem So in its function and execution, Malgus would be more accurately described as a free-form fighter. His simplistic technique maximized the effectiveness of physical enhancement, while its adaptability allowed him to contend with more refined and skillful opponents by reconfiguring on the fly. His loose, free-form style acted as the great equalizer, allowing him to defeat many of the greatest duelists among both the Jedi and the Sith by canceling out the skill differential, besting superior swordsmen by being a better fighter. However, as his first confrontation with Aaron Lanier demonstrated, he was vulnerable against his own brawler tactics. By keeping his style so loose, he effectively sacrificed the ability to leverage a technical advantage over an inferior opponent, his success ultimately predicated on experience rather than skill. He was an expert at anticipating the responses of his opponents and using this knowledge to either preempt or manipulate them, such as when he baited Ven Zalo by feigning weakness to lure him in close before impaling him. However, his focus on his opponent was so complete that it often led to tunnel vision, leading him to disregard his surroundings, and he has consistently failed to either use his environment to his advantage or to prevent his opponent from doing the same against him. More brawler than duelist, Malgus's approach to battle would be best summarized as endure and power through. As the defender, he would hold his ground and stonewall the opponent, relying on his armor to absorb anything that slipped through while working in counters to break the opponent's momentum, allowing him to retaliate. But more often than not, Malgus was the aggressor, slamming into opponents like a freight train and tearing through their defenses with direct offense. If his initial push was unsuccessful, he would ramp up the control and start getting creative, working in physical combat, breaking out the force abilities, or picking up that extra lightsaber that someone dropped. With his initial combat training under Sherrod Het, the Howl Runner, A'Sharad Het was already a tried and tested Tusken warrior when he joined the Jedi Order. As a knight, his skills were further honed by training from the likes of Ki-Adi-Mundi and Anya Kuro, while he cut his teeth against the Jedi Hunter Aurra Sing, survived an assault from Anakin Skywalker while armed only with a Gatterfee, and after the fall of the Jedi Order, acquitted himself well against Obi-Wan Kenobi. Experienced and battle-hardened, Darth Krayt was arguably the greatest lightsaber duelist of his era, having killed thousands of opponents by his own estimation. While his role as Galactic Emperor meant that he was rarely involved in direct combat, he clearly made a point of keeping his skills honed. As a Jedi, A'Sharad Het had carried two standard lightsabers, his own and his father's. As a Sith, Darth Krayt wielded a set of red-bladed weapons with hilts that appeared to be composed of Yorick coral. The red blades indicated that the lightsabers were fitted with synthetic crystals, which traded handling for cutting power. With decades of experience wielding these weapons, Krayt was obviously capable of compensating for this factor. As specified on his character sheet in the Legacy Era Campaign Guide, Krayt's chosen martial arts disciplines were Naiman and Jarkai. Form 6 lightsaber combat, Naiman was a hybrid martial art intended for general combat, specifically noted for its emphasis on the integration of force-based telekinetic strikes and alternative weapons training. Jarkai was a related discipline built around dual-blade fencing, this type of combat being Krayt's primary specialization. Furthermore, the article, Barely Tolerable, Alien Henchman of the Empire, established A'Sharad Het as a Teräs Käsi instructor, his method emphasizing the channeling of aggression. From what can be observed in the comics, Darth Krayt's personal style was extremely physical, using his entire body to build power and momentum by continuously shifting his stance and grip, leveraging both strength and dexterity for hard-hitting and complex attack sequences. What Juyo practitioners achieved by channeling the Force, Krayt achieved through physical technique and utter control. Instead of simply tearing through an opponent's defenses with animal ferocity, he subverted and overpowered them with calculated precision, doing so with such speed that he has slain several adversaries with a single blow. Applying this trait to defense made Krayt virtually untouchable, deflecting aside attacks and countering immediately. His ability to achieve this with twin lightsabers was further reinforced by his skillful integration of Force strikes, as well as his willingness to set aside his extra blade to allow for two-handed power blows. This intelligent and uncompromising use of all of the tools in his arsenal made him a devastating opponent, capable of cleaving through large groups of adversaries in a heartbeat. Darth Krayt was an uncompromising aggressor dedicated to putting opponents on the defensive as quickly as possible, and thanks to his skill advantage and sheer power in the Force, he was typically successful. Called the Dragon of the Sith by his followers, Krayt was a consummate showman, and understood the value of psychological warfare and intimidation. He knew when to be charismatic and charming, when to talk and taunt, and when to remain silent and implacable, provoking anger and fear alike. However, as a cult leader, Krayt's power was in the image of invincibility he projected, and anything that undermined this image was a threat. By this same token, he himself was vulnerable to manipulation, particularly when the comments were directed towards his physical weakness and impending death. However, due to his massive skill and power, provoking Krayt's anger was often a fatal mistake. Throughout his reign as Dark Lord of the Sith and Galactic Emperor, few could stand against him, and the best most could hope for was to simply contend. Darth Krayt was never bested in a lightsaber duel, his defeat at Had Abaddon achieved through overwhelming power in the Force on the part of his enemies, rather than martial skill. Darth Krayt's track record, specifically as a lightsaber duelist, is a testament to his skill, but also a clear indication that he has never tussled with a true equal. As well trained as they were, the Imperial Knights couldn't even delay the inevitable, and Cade Skywalker's raw talent merely allowed him to contend. Even the opponent most capable of matching him, the spirit of Carnus Mur and his current host body Celeste Morn, only defeated him through overwhelming power in the Force. Most of the great Jedi Swordmasters of the period died with the Ossus Academy, and those who remained gave Krayt a wide berth. All of this raises the question of how Krayt would be able to handle a confrontation with someone who actually matched him. Based on what has been observed from him, he would not allow himself to be overwhelmed, his composure built on his iron will, and as has already been discussed, he could apply his skill to defense just as effectively as he could to offense. He may not like doing so, but he can stand his ground and weather the assault. Darth Malgus's brutal, heavy-duty weapon complemented his fighting style, but Krayt's twin lightsabers provided more options in combat, which his fighting style fully leveraged. Assuming that I am correct about Malgus's skill configuration, then he makes for an intriguing contrast to Krayt. Nyman, Jarkai, and Teräs Käsi were each comprehensive specialist techniques with their own offensive and defensive practices, which Krayt layered on top of each other. With shii-cho, Surisu, Shien, and Juyo, Malgus would have possessed an array of distinct component mechanics that fit together as puzzle pieces, all simplistic enough for easy interchangeability and adaptability. While I view Krayt's twin-blade fencing style as clearly more refined than Malgus's gritty brawler style, the gap isn't substantial. We're talking the difference between Padawan Anakin and Count Dooku, where Anakin was outclassed, but his focused technique and determination still allowed him to contend on a near equal level. And given how Malgus's style was constructed, contending with adversaries more skilled than himself was arguably his specialty. Both combatants have been faced by one another's fighter type in the past, Malgus facing a versatile trickster in Kaosen Durach, and Krayt facing an adaptable brawler in Cade Skywalker. In both instances, their response was to hit this opponent with heavy offense and batter them into submission, a tactic that would not be viable for either combatant here because they are equally unyielding. A lightsaber duel between Darth Malgus and Darth Krayt would be a slugging match, and due to their equal mastery of opposing disciplines and their extensive combat experience, I don't see either as having any sort of conclusive advantage over the other. I declare the Betrayer and the Dragon equal as martial artists and lightsaber duelists. Darth Malgus was a giant in an era of giants, a relentless Sith warlord renowned for his elemental fury, his feats unduplicated for millennia. A graduate from the Dromund Kaas Academy, Malgus truly came into his own during the Great Galactic War, beginning with the vision of a galaxy in flames he experienced during his first pilgrimage to Korriban. Effectively a dark side worshipper, Malgus dedicated himself to his rage, completely releasing himself into the Force. He was revered by the soldiers under his command, respecting their service and driving them to excellence. Appropriately, Darth Malgus was the greatest Sith warrior of his age. He zealously pursued strength through conflict, developing his skill set to address the needs of the battlefield. He emphasized visceral offensive abilities, fully leveraging his strength in the Force in devastating area effect attacks. Despite his ostensible brutality, Malgus was utterly utilitarian, his excess in fact carefully calculated to frighten enemies and spur on allies. Telekinesis and Force Lightning were emphasized for their obvious combative applications. With the former, Malgus's lifting strength was several tons, and he could reliably overcome passive Force defenses, scattering even fellow Sith Lords with powerful Force waves. With the latter, his energy output was sufficient to disfigure individual targets, and he could disable groups with area effect Force storms. On the defensive front, his active Force shield allowed him to survive Satele Shan's mountain-shattering Force wave, and he was adept at deflecting lightning with his lightsaber. Malgus expertly integrated Force strikes into lightsaber combat, as well as chaining them together with one another. He halted Jace Malcolm's charge with a barrage of Force lightning before repelling him with telekinesis. He thrashed one Republic soldier with a Force push, and without missing a beat, dispatched two more with a lightsaber throw. Against Venzalo, he used a lightsaber throw to force the Jedi Master into an evasive leap, then slammed him in midair with telekinesis, driving him through a pile of debris and briefly stunning him. Zalo only barely evaded Malgus's killing blow. In fact, Malgus's most powerful ability, the Force Maelstrom, can be seen as the ultimate expression of this combination tactic. Cocooned in a Force shield, he would stand at the eye of a storm of telekinesis and lightning, turning every loose object into a lethal projectile and a lightning conductor. Even Emperor Palpatine millennia afterwards acknowledged Malgus's power, crediting him for thinking on the monumental scale. On a more mundane level, dark rage was Malgus's default state, yet he remained cold. Though he evidently wasn't versed in the healing arts, Malgus could fight through injury by feeding off of the pain. In addition to his aforementioned gift for visions, Malgus was adept at detecting light side Force users, and when necessary was capable of suppressing his own Force signature. Furthermore, he appeared to have been capable of delivering commands to his followers via direct telepathy. As the former apprentice of Lord Vindican, himself the student of Darth Krayt, a notorious Sith pureblood supremacist, Malgus descended from a line of Sith Lords who emphasized lineage and blood ties. However, Malgus's experiences in the unknown regions led him to diverge wildly from his masters and his peers, and he quietly rejected the Sith Empire's anti-alien policy. When Darth Krayt finally returned from his decades-long sojourn into the unknown regions, only to find a Sith Empire rife with impure alien lords, it was Malgus who orchestrated his death. Malgus the Betrayer lived up to his name by rejecting the old Sith emphasis on blood purity, prioritizing the higher call of the dark side itself far and above the old Sith lineages. For all intents and purposes, Darth Malgus was at one with the dark side, a willing extension of the destructive power he wielded. Though direct and brutal, he wielded his powers intuitively and fluidly, simplicity enabling adaptability. Darth Krayt was unquestionably the most powerful practitioner of the Sith arts in his era, a pervasive manipulator, and a devastatingly powerful dark-side warrior. Taught to embrace pain by Vergere, he opened himself to the dark side and experienced a vision of his own Sith Order, and dedicated himself, body and soul, to making this vision a reality. He immersed himself in the lore of the ancients, and projected his mind into the netherworld of the Force to broaden his understanding. A formidable telepath, Krayt's control of his order was rooted in his powers of perception, deception, and influence. Despite this, his demonstrated skill set aligned most closely with the Sith warriors. This was a logical extension of his initial training as a Tusken Raider, where his father taught him to use the Force as a weapon against enemies of the tribe, which carried over to his training as a Jedi, where he fell in line with the Guardian branch. As a cult leader, he used these direct combative abilities to provide tangible displays of power, a tactic he originally applied as a Tusken to prove his worth to the tribe. As a result, Krayt's Force powers were both visually spectacular and decidedly brutal. Krayt's primary tools in this regard were telekinesis and lightning, manhandling his followers with the former and anointing them in the latter. Appropriately for a Nyman specialist, Krayt's application of the Force in live combat was as a supplement to lightsaber combat, staggering adversaries with calculated bursts of telekinesis and lightning, occasionally delivering them via physical contact, bypassing Force defenses. With telekinesis, he employed pushes to stagger enemies, and did employ lightsaber throws as a Jedi. Lightning he used far more heavily, hitting adversaries hard with both abrupt bursts and sustained barrages, notably killing off a swarm of Rakghoul. On the defensive front, Krayt has been observed creating a telekinetic shield to survive a fall of several hundred feet, and likely had a strong passive telekinetic barrier. While we have no examples of him using Tutuminus until after his resurrection, many of his followers did employ it, so it was no doubt well within his capabilities. Furthermore, his biotech implants clearly provided him with a strong resistance against lightning, given the strength of the barrages he has survived. This goal of projecting an image of invincibility carried over to Krayt's use of force-based physical augmentation, which he relied on to conceal his failing health. This power was reinforced by his knowledge of dark rage, channeling his pain and anger to boost his output even further. On the opposite end of the spectrum, he was a master of Force Heal and the associated healing trance, which he relied on to endure the strain of combat. He could enhance this capability with Consume Essence, feeding off of the pain and fear of others to amplify his own powers. Darth Krayt attempted to gain the knowledge of Darths Andedu, Nihilus, and Bane by accessing their holocrons, but was rejected by the avatars of all three. Unbeknownst to Krayt, Andedu's holocron was actually his phylactery, containing the spiritual essence of the ancient lord himself. In a demonstration of spiteful contempt, Andedu accelerated the growth of the Vong coral seeds in Krayt's body, which bonded with Krayt's Vonduan crab armor and threatened to consume him on the spot. Channeling his rage, Krayt used an inwardly directed blast of Force Lightning to kill off the excess growth, undoing Andedu's influence. Darth Krayt's title as the Dragon of the Sith served as a testament to his power. Even before his resurrection, Krayt was effectively the ultimate Naiman master, not the absolute master of any one ability, but a distinguished expert with all of them. As a Sith warrior, Krayt had a warrior's mentality, leveraging all of his skills in equal measure by seamlessly integrating them into lightsaber combat. Though cutting loose purely with his Force abilities was not his first response, he was perfectly willing to do so if the situation demanded it. He was an experienced jack-of-all-trades who could comfortably function in any role required of him, whether overbearing cult leader or overwhelming combatant, duelist or juggernaut. With the Force, as with all other things, Malgus and Krayt share strong similarities combined with stark differences, having taken opposing paths to roughly the same destination. Both were dark side warriors who aggressively wielded the Force to back up lightsaber combat, skillfully integrating them into a single overall fighting method. They employed many common powers to very similar levels, Malgus favoring telekinesis while Krayt favored lightning. Notably, while both clearly boasted strong Force defenses, both have been forced to rely on their armor and implants to tank Force attacks. While Krayt's tactic of delivering Force strikes through physical contact demonstrated the degree to which he had integrated his powers into his martial arts, he lacked Malgus's flexibility. Where Malgus ingeniously chained his powers together to subvert opponents, Krayt never displayed that kind of creativity, his applications being calculated but conventional. This advantage carries over to their advanced special abilities. Krayt invested much of his focus into powers of influence and foresight, and had no direct equivalent to Malgus's Force Maelstrom. While there is no question that the mastery of the Shatterpoint variant Dark Transfer that Krayt achieved after his resurrection eclipsed anything Malgus achieved, Krayt simply isn't at that point yet. Malgus is a much more effective channel for the dark side, where Krayt is held back by his need for control. Malgus the Betrayer gets the edge as a Force wielder. Darths Malgus and Krayt combine strong similarities with a competing balance of opposites. Malgus may have aligned with the Sith Juggernaut and Krayt with the Sith Marauder, but both were archetypal Sith warriors, their differing approaches being the two sides of the same coin. Given what Krayt is trying to accomplish, it's appropriate that the main deciding factor in this contest is physical capability, as Krayt's body perfectly represents the impossibility of his goal. Krayt is trying to encompass everything within himself, and make the universe an extension of his will, just as his body was implanted with biotech to make him something more than human. However, just as the universe is too vast for the mind of a human to comprehend and control, his body is ultimately too weak to contain the living implants. He's trying to consolidate everything within a single vessel, but all he is doing is spreading himself thin. Rather than adding up into a cohesive whole, Krayt is fragmented. Though the following is pure speculation, I believe that this dynamic directly carried over into Force abilities. Where Malgus gave himself over to the dark side and became a conduit for its power, Krayt spent 100 years meditating on the dark side in an obvious attempt to control it, in keeping with his philosophy of imposing order on chaos. Instead of being a Force channeler like Anakin Skywalker, Darth Krayt was a Force capacitor like Count Dooku. The pros and cons of this sort of relationship with the Force were best outlined by Dooku's commentary in the Revenge of the Sith novelization. On the one hand, he could wield his powers with an immense level of fine control, manipulating the currents of the Force around him to exert greater influence over his surroundings, to the point where he could overcome Jedi combatants by controlling the very currents that they released themselves into, drawing their strikes to his parries, and driving his own ripostes with dark power that disrupted their balance and timing. Dooku described this experience as akin to becoming the axis of the universe. But, on the other hand, the full extent of the power he wielded was limited, as he was restricted to that amount of power that his mind could comprehend and encompass. Dooku, and by extension Krayt, could only put in so much before he capped out. By contrast, Darth Malgus's total willingness to submit to the darkness allowed him to channel its full destructive power with no restriction. However, I must stress that all of these factors merely place Krayt at a disadvantage. He is not truly overmatched. His overall performance and power level is still directly comparable to Malgus's, and the idea of Krayt leveraging his skill to score an early victory is not outside the realm of possibility. Unfortunately for him, Malgus's adaptability and grit makes this unlikely, and as Krayt burns out, Malgus would be intensifying. I declare Darth Malgus the victor.